Good evening, voters. I'm Mike Piggott, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters, I'd like to welcome you to this debate between the judicial candidates in Tippecanoe Superior Court 4. The League would like to thank First Christian Church in Lafayette for the use of their facilities and their live streaming equipment, along with their technical staff, that makes it all possible for this live stream debate to take place. Over the next 30 minutes, we will explore questions important to the community with the candidates for Superior Court 4. They are Matthew BOULAC, the Democrat, and Republican Matt Sandy. Each candidate will have an opportunity to make an opening statement, followed by questions which have been developed by the League. Neither candidate has seen those questions before the evening began. A coin toss before the debate began will determine who makes the first opening statement, and that coin toss was won by Matthew BOULAC.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank our moderator, Mr. Piggott, and the League of Women Voters for giving us this opportunity to speak with you tonight. For the last 3 years, I've been the judicial officer in the Child Support Court in Tippecanoe County. And in that time, I've recognized that many of the people in my court are also experiencing criminal problems in Superior Court 4. One of the goals of my court is to get people who are not working back to work and to keep them working. To achieve this, they need to not have repeated incarcerations. And what I've seen in my court is by taking a moment to identifying some underlying issues, they're able to find direction and stop coming back into the courts again and again. In Superior Court 4, what I envision, at least on the criminal side, is a court that has a problem-solving mentality, where we look at the issues that are facing people in the courtroom, and then in many cases, we're able to look at them and push them through into what's called a problem-solving court, to address whatever the issues are, the underlying issues that they're having that are keeping them coming back into the court again and again. In my experience, what I've seen is that we see issues with substance abuse and we see issues with mental health. And we can assist them by offering them opportunities to get assistance with those issues. By offering them those opportunities, the hope is, and the goal is, that they will not have repeated incarcerations. The other thing I've noticed and found in my courtroom is that many people don't know where to go for help. And that once they're offered services, they are able to engage in those services, get the help that they need, and stay out of the court. People are willing to engage in these services if given the opportunity. Many times they just don't know where to find them. I know this works because I've seen the success in my court. And I'd like the opportunity to take what I've learned in the 4D court to Superior Court 4. Thank you.
Matt Sandy, your chance to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Matt Sandy. I want to be judge at Superior Court 4. I'm not a politician. I've never run for any position before. I'll never run for any other position other than this one. I have no other ambitions. This is a job I want. It's a job I'm most qualified to serve my community. I've been in Tippecanoe County my entire life. I love this community. I'm doing this because of a need in our community with the retirement of Judge Zeman. And speaking with my family, it's a way for us to serve our community. My wife, Kelly, and I have been married for almost 27 years. We have 2 great kids. Just a couple years, we'll be empty nesters, and it's time where our family can make this commitment. I grew up in Tippecanoe County courtrooms watching my father try cases. I knew at a very early age what I wanted to do, and that's what I've done. I graduated from Jeff High School, Purdue University, IU McKinney School of Law. After my second year of law school, I got a special certification to go into court and practice law in the summer of 1988. I tried my first 2 jury trials, and I've been in court ever since. I had an extensive criminal, civil, administrative trial practice, including hundreds of trials, extensive civil, criminal, administrative appellate practice, including oral argument in the Indiana Supreme Court, and the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. I've served as Judge Pro Tem in every county in this court, including Superior 4, regularly, probably more than any attorney. I've instructed other lawyers through the Indiana Continuing Legal Education Foundation. I've done everything an attorney can do over the last 32 years, and a lot of it. I've trained literally for this job my entire life. I think that's what it takes, the experience necessary to be a good judge in a high-volume hybrid court. It's a very important court to our community. I think it takes a lot of more other things that I hope to get a chance to talk about. Thank you.
Well, let's begin by doing that, and let me ask you this question. What are the biggest challenges facing the courts in Tippecanoe County, and how would you address those challenges?
Thanks, Mike. As I said, it is a high-volume court. It is, in my opinion, like the front line on the war on opioids, synthetic drugs, methamphetamine. It's the low-level users and the addicts. Again, my experience since the beginning of my career, I've been in this court. I've been working these cases for over 3 decades. I'm familiar with the resources available to them, the case managers, the therapists, their strengths, their weaknesses, the tendencies of the offenders in those positions. It's what I've done. And if there's a lapse in that, the community will feel it. It is a community safety issue. So I think managing that is important. I've got a lot of ideas, and I'm sure some questions coming up will allow us to talk about that. Ideas involving employment agencies to help rehabilitation. And we can talk about that. A mentor program. I met this week with Sadie Harper Scott, the president of the NAACP and the new diversity officer and integration coordinator at the Tippecanoe School Corporation. Talked about putting together a mentor program. All of these are designed to have better outcomes, and we'll talk more about what that means, and better outcomes mean safer community.
Matthew BOULAC, in your mind, what are the biggest challenges facing the courts in this county, and how would you address them?
Well, I think in this county we've seen an influx over the last few years of an increase in substance abuse as well as the identification of mental health issues throughout our community. You know, we have a population of homeless here that spends a lot of time going in and out of jail, and I see many of these folks in my courtroom. When I started with the Department of Child Services, we saw, after a few years there, we did see a huge influx in this area of substance abuse cases and substance abuse issues. And those are things that I'm seeing now in my court as well, where I see many people who are in and out of jail because they've got these substance abuse problems, they're struggling with mental health issues, and dealing with those problems as a judiciary is, I think, one of the larger problems that we have. Trying to sort out how you address these issues when you have multiple issues that are going on in these cases where you've got criminality and you've got families and you've got other things going on, and how to take these folks who are struggling to find a path through and give them opportunities to get out of whatever hole they've dug themselves. And many times that is, and that's why I'm focusing on the problem-solving courts, because many times that is giving them a hand up and showing them the way and the path. And we do that by slowing down a little bit. 4 is a high-volume court. But I think that over time we can reduce the volume by addressing the issues that are going on in these courts, getting these folks with mental health issues and substance abuse issues help, and then they will not come back to the courts, which will eventually lead to a reduced number of people flowing through our courtrooms.
I want to ask you to do a little reflection. Describe a time, if you will, when you became aware of your own bias or a blind spot related to a case you were working, and what internal and external steps did you take to mitigate your bias or lack of awareness?
So as a judicial officer, I think you always have to be aware of bias that's going on around you, and you have to, I say check it at the door when you walk in. You have to be aware of where you are and what you do. A specific instance of a bias, I can't think of anything specifically at this moment, but I know that when I'm making decisions on the bench and when I was an attorney for the Department of Child Services, you always go through kind of a checklist of, is this what I'm doing? Why am I doing this? And making sure that what you're doing is in accordance with whatever the law is that you're working under at that time. We see so many different people through the courtroom. And in a high-volume court like Superior Court 4, you really don't get time to really identify faces. In the moment that you're there, you know exactly what's going on in that case. But the speed at which those cases go, many times, there's really no opportunity for reflection. And in all honesty, there's not a lot of time to create a bias in it either, because it's just going so fast.
Matt Sandy, would you describe for us a time perhaps when you became aware of your own bias or a blind spot related to a case you were working, and then what kind of steps did you take to mitigate that?
Great question, Mike. I'm going to take us way back, and you may remember this. Might be, I told you before we started, it's been a while since I've talked to you, and this might have been it. I think it was back in the 90s. I was representing the city of Lafayette at the time. We were doing all the civil litigation on behalf of the city, and there was a really unpopular rally that came downtown. I want to say it was the Ku Klux Klan. And nobody was very happy about that, including myself. And of course, it was newsworthy, and you all wanted to cover it, and the city didn't want you to. They wanted to block the reporters out of the rally zone, and we wanted to kind of group all the bigots in one area and keep them from hurting anybody, I guess. And the media didn't like that. And go into court, and here I am arguing against the First Amendment. anyway, and it was just a lot of my whole life has been about the Constitution. My North Star is the Constitution. I've been, as I said, from a very early age, I knew I wanted to defend the Constitution and people's constitutional rights. And that was one where we had conflicts in our constitutional rights, and it was a very interesting interplay of that, and it certainly challenged my biases and made me question, my clients' positions at times. And I think even you and I might have butted heads on that one. So I always kind of remember that one, but it was a long time ago. Thanks.
We won, by the way, just so you know.
I might have thrown that one, Mike. That's what I'm saying.
Well, law and order is certainly a popular, strong political cry today, alongside prolonged protests for justice. There's a broad spectrum, though, of philosophy, from punishment to restorative justice, and we want to know where you fall on that spectrum. And what would that look like in a practice in your courtroom?
Very important question in this courtroom. I've already identified the sort of cases that we're seeing. The Indiana Constitution is a constitution based upon rehabilitation. That's got to be the overarching prong that we're looking at. Now, there's times when there's other prongs that we need to look at, but particularly in Superior Court 4, there are a number of resources available. We have our Community Corrections Department and numerous levels of that. We have court services, we have the Sentinel program, the Victim Impact program. Again, I've worked with all of these agencies from their inception. I know their caseworkers, their case managers, their therapists. I know their tendencies, I know their strengths and their weaknesses. I know where there's some spots in the system that need some help. Again, I was talking to Miss Sadie Harper-Scott about trying to put together a mentor program, again, hoping for a better outcome for some individuals that haven't got too far into the system. I would like to use an employment agency early on in a case. I think employment is a big part of rehabilitation. All my clients are required to be working for me to represent them. That leads to better outcomes. That is less taxpayer burden. The client is more satisfied with the outcome, more likely to succeed and not be violated. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about better outcomes. More efficient, less costly, less recidivism, and all of that adds up to community safety. Thanks.
Matthew BOULAC, let me explain the whole question fully for you, but law and order is currently a strong political cry along with the prolonged protest for justice. It's a broad spectrum of philosophy, though, that ranges from punishment to restorative justice. Where do you fall on that spectrum, and what would that look like in your courtroom?
I think where I fall on the spectrum is that we have to give people an opportunity to make strides to make themselves better. And in order to do that, you have to give them opportunities to participate and get rid of whatever those underlying issues are that they struggle with. Matt's talked about putting employment in place, and I've seen how employment can help people out through my 4D court, but a lot of times there's an underlying issue that prevents that. And you have to give people an opportunity in a way to fail before you can actually bring punishment into the equation. And so you have to set up a series of things for them to participate in, for them to show you that they have a way out, that they're willing to work a way out, and give them an opportunity to do that. And sometimes that takes time, and I think one of the problems we have in our criminal justice system and in a lot of our court systems is we don't have time to work these things. That people want instant results for instant problems. And they see a problem and they say, well, this is what should happen with this individual. And the bottom line is sometimes folks need a minute and they need to make mistakes. And then you have to give them an opportunity to make mistakes. If they continue to make those mistakes, then things have to change. If they refuse to engage in those services, then things have to change. But I have to agree with Matt that I think we start by trying to lift people up in the community, give them opportunities to better themselves, and make our community a safer place overall by giving them the tools that they need in order to be a productive member of what our society is.
Well, that's much leading into my next question, and that is that these courtrooms are certainly intimidating and busy places for people. And what would you do to ensure defendants, number one, understand the process, understand their rights, and that they're respectfully heard and not just a case number?
So in my courtroom, what I do to address this issue is I'm very clear with people. When they come in, I explain their rights to them. when we do contempt cases in my courtroom, there is a possibility of an incarceration, so you have to sit down and explain to them what their rights are. I ask them multiple times whether or not they have questions, if they understand everything. One of the things that I've learned as being a judicial officer is that you have to be aware for certain language. People who don't understand things don't always tell you. And you have to listen to what they're saying to you throughout the course of a hearing in order to understand that maybe they didn't get everything. And then occasionally you have to stop and go back. And again, that takes time to do that. But if really the purpose of the court system is to delegate justice, and that's really what I think it is that we're here to partially guide people through the process and help them out. But when you identify someone who's maybe not understanding everything, you need to take those steps to make sure that they are. And if they're unable to understand those things, then you have to take additional steps to make sure their rights are protected. And I've done that in my courtroom again and again and again. Seeing people who want you to think that they get everything, but it's obvious that they don't. And then you have to stop and say, okay, did you understand this? Do you understand that? You have to change your language to bring it down to maybe what they don't understand. The legal terms that we use are very confusing. And if you don't do this every day, it is absolutely intimidating. And sometimes you have to change the way you talk to people when they're in the courtroom with you. And if you, in Superior Court 4, if I were elected Superior Court 4, that's what you would see in there, is a judge who's listening to people when they talk to them, who's looking for body cues and things that would tell the judge that, in fact, they're not getting things, and then changing language and using words that people are more familiar with in order to get them to understand what's going on.
Matt Sandy, what would you do to ensure that defendants understand the process and what their rights are and that they're respectfully heard and not just treated like a case number?
Thank you, Mike. Obviously, a very important question to me. Protecting those rights is what I've been doing for over 3 decades. Certainly, first of all, understanding their basic rights, I guess the bar that's set by the law of understanding on the part of those that appear in a court. First of all, in the age of technology is kind of almost rote now. By the time a defendant actually gets to court, they've been played their rights repeatedly. Now, as far as getting some more detail in that, which is important, first of all, the case management structure set up in Superior Court 4, very efficient, very important for a high-volume court. I think there can be some tweaks made to it. There's some tweaks we've made over the years since Judge Donay began with that process that have helped. Honestly, the age of COVID has changed it. There's been a lot of streamlining of that and online use of that. The important thing is, early on in a case, having the experience to be able to know the cases that we can divert and maybe do pretrial diversion programs on, the people that aren't likely to reoffend, the more active users, the addicts, so that you can spend more time on the more problem cases. Those are the cases more likely to come back, more cases likely to cause the biggest burden on the county, more likely to lead to a lack of community safety. So that's the kind of experience I'm bringing. That's what I've been doing for 30 years. I've gotten very good at understanding these offenders, their tendencies, their hacks around the system, unfortunately for them, and in motivating them, again, to change their lifestyle and turn their life around.
Let's go beyond your courtroom, though. Does a sitting judge have any role in advocacy or education in the community?
Off the bench, certainly they can have. Judge Donay, I used to volunteer with him, the We the People program. We used to go once or twice a year to various high schools and colleges and basically teach the Constitution in different formats. If there are issues raised in the community, I don't think it's inappropriate for a judge to raise it if it's not a matter of controversy pending before the court. Certainly, I've been a person pretty vocal in the community when there's been issues like that. Obviously, if it's a matter of controversy in front of the court, that's something that the judge needs to limit his comments to the bench. But I think being active in the community and in community areas of interest, being vocal about it, perhaps even there's a lot of the judges have taught at Purdue and taught at Ivy Tech and outreached in that way. I think it's important for the community to be able to see their judges and talk to their judges, and that's a big part of small town living, in my opinion, and I've always enjoyed that about Lafayette and Tippecanoe County. So I see no issue as long as it's not a matter before them that they outreach to the community.
Matthew BOULAC, do you see a sitting judge having any role in advocacy or education in the community?
I do, and even as a judicial commissioner, I've participated in the Constitution Day and gone out to the schools to talk I've got my youngest son is 7, and so I've gone to his class and spoken with his class and spoken with other children in the community regarding the Constitution and what it means. Overall, judges do have a place to advocate for things, and recently, with all the protests we've seen going on with Black Lives Matter, there's actually been some, the Supreme Court has come up with some new guidance for judges in the community and what they can do and how they can participate in that. And the guidance is very specific in that you are allowed to participate in those things as long as they are non-political. And so, there is a place for a judge to be part of an advocacy in the community, but you have to be careful because there's a very fine line and you can cross it very quickly from going into just participating and being an advocate into being in something where it could be in front of your court again. And that does limit how judges can participate overall. Judges have to walk a very fine line in their community about being an advocate and then balancing that role with being also a judicial officer in your community. And so overall, I do believe that judges even in their community, and not only that, there are judges, and I know there are judges from Tippecanoe County who've gone down and spoken in front of the legislature when they have particular expertise in order to address issues in the law that they're seeing and use their expertise to inform the legislature about different things that are going on and how those laws are interacting and changes that need to be made to those laws throughout our state.
Let me ask you this then. You've chosen to run as a Democrat. Mm-hmm. What should the voters understand about your choice of party affiliation, and how would you act as a judge on the bench? Will that relate?
So I've been on the bench 3 years. I've been an attorney for close to 15. And I can't ever tell you, even though I'm a Democrat, that I've ever had a moment where I've thought to myself, this is a Democratic decision or this is a Republican decision, because in all honesty, it doesn't matter. I would say that probably Matt and I are very similar in a lot of the things that we talk about and the things that we do, because we both came up with the Constitution as our guidance. And while our takes on the Constitution may be a little bit different, I think overall you would find that we are probably very similar in the way that we think about things. And I think all judges are, and most attorneys are as well. But never in my time on the bench nor my time as an attorney have I ever thought to myself that my political leanings or political background has any bearing on the decisions that I make.
Let me ask you that same question, Matt Sandy. You're running as a Republican for this judgeship. What should the voters understand about your choice of party affiliation and how you will act as a judge on the bench?
Well, as I said, I'm not a politician. I've always been a Republican, but in my career, certainly as a judicial officer, politics has no role in it whatsoever. In my opinion, you should be a libertarian, and that's frankly, in my career, how I've been. North Star is always the Constitution. Politics have no role, no play in it whatsoever. Look, this is what this job is going to require and the experience it's going to require. In a few months, the judge of Superior Court 4 is going to be sitting in a jury trial, presiding over it. And there's going to be a jury sitting there and waiting for the judge to put on the first witness. And the attorney's going to object and file a motion in limine for 404B evidence rule or 615 evidence rule. And first witness is going to come on, and there's going to be an objection for evidence rule 802. And the judge, it's not time to read the rule or hear argument or brief the issue. You have to rule. You have to rule right now, and you have to be right. And wrong answers cost Tippecanoe County thousands of dollars for every one. This is something you don't learn in law school. You learn about it in law school. You learn it by doing it dozens and dozens and hundreds of times. That's what I've done. I've been involved in all of these issues in trials, it's that kind of experience that's going to make a good judge of a high-volume court.
Thank you for that. Time for questions is up, but we want to give our candidates an opportunity to sum things up and make your case to the voters. Your closing argument.
I get to start?
You start.
Oh, I get to start, okay. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all, and those of you who've tuned in, I appreciate the time that you've given us tonight. I've been a judicial officer in this county for 3 years. I've been an attorney for 15. I've got the experience, the knowledge, and the know-how in order to perform this job on day one. I understand the responsibility of being a judicial officer, what it takes to be a judicial officer, and the difficulties that come along with it. And I'm hoping that you'll give me an opportunity to continue to be a judicial officer in Superior Court 4. Thank you.
Matt Sandy, your closing argument.
Thank you, Mike. As I said, I've spent my entire life training for this job. There's no other job I want to do. I'm doing this to serve my community because there's a need there. I have spent over 3 decades doing everything that is done in that court since the day I started. I started in Superior Court 4, working with then young hotshot deputy prosecutor Laura Zeman. And so I was trained the hard way. If elected, I will bring all of my experience, all of my passion, all of my energy, everything I've got to the job, and try to make for a better community. Thank you, Mike.
Well, thank you. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Greater Lafayette, we want to thank both of these candidates for participating this evening. And if you want to learn more about the candidates on the November ballot, the League suggests visiting their online voter guide. It's at www.vote411.org. Absentee voting has already started, and in-person early voting starts in Tippecanoe County on October the 6th. So plan to make your voice heard in the coming election. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll continue with the debate between the candidates seeking the new court judgeship, Tippecanoe Superior Court 7.
When you vote, something powerful happens to your voice. Your single ballot becomes a megaphone. You stand out and tell your community and our nation what you want for our future. Vote411.org is your tool for accurate and unbiased election information on the issues that affect you and the people you care about. Through Vote 411, you can register to vote using our online form that only takes a few minutes to complete, available in multiple languages. Check your registration status and find out where to vote right on the Vote 411 homepage, and get important up-to-the-minute information on the elections happening in your state and local community through the Vote 411 interactive map. Your voice is strong and important. It is a critical part of our democracy. Vote411.org is your tool for all the election information you need. Get online, get the facts, and make your voice heard on Election Day. Powered by the League of Women Voters Education Fund.
The League of Women Voters was founded almost 100 years ago with the right to vote for women. Not only the right to vote, but an informed vote.
You need to know everything about that candidate. You need to be able to ask that candidate questions.
I attend a lot of county council meetings and planning and zoning advisory board meetings. And I listen for where there are issues that we may have a position so that we know how to weigh in where we're needed in our community.
The League has been very active in going into the schools, making sure that it's easy for students to register to vote.
Also making sure there's equity in voting access. So working on issues of redistricting, issues of gerrymandering, issues of money in politics, issues of how are we hearing the voices of our community and which of those voices are being marginalized.
The League can come in and say, okay, let's go to the people that are disenfranchised. We don't care who they vote for. We want people to vote because that's what makes democracy work.
I think that the organization is going to continue to attract a diverse membership, and I think that that will help us in working toward the goal of better representation for everybody.
There's a wonderful opportunity here for people who are younger to come and learn from women who have been part of social movements for years and years.
It's our job to be a mentor to the newer members because they're the ones, after all, that are going to be carrying the banner of the League into the next 100 years.
Without the League of Women Voters, this country would lack a role model for the progress that can be made when you work in a nonpartisan way.
Without the League of Women Voters, voting rights would be left just to the privileged.
I'm proud of the passion that the League has for these issues of voter justice and equity in our political system. That is exciting to me, and I think that'll really carry the League forward.
We stand for the nonpartisanship that we should all have as leaders in our democracy today.
"100 years ago, the League of Women Voters was founded by suffragists who believed in the power of women to create a more perfect democracy. Throughout the last century, we've never stopped moving towards a future where every person in our country is empowered to play a critical role in shaping our democracy. Today, LWV activists throughout the United States are working to expand voting rights, ensure fair representation in government, and push for a more... This progress is in our DNA. Just as our founders did 100 years ago, today our activists are shaping the future of voting rights in America. See how their story could be yours.
Good evening, voters. My name is Mike Piggott, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Greater Lafayette, I'd like to welcome you to this debate between the judicial candidates for Tippecanoe Superior Court number 7. The League would like to thank First Christian Church here in Lafayette for the use of their facilities, their live streaming equipment, and the technical staff that's making the live stream of this debate possible tonight. Now, over the next 30 minutes, we will explore questions important to the community with the candidates for Superior Court 7. They are Jackie Chosneck, the Democrat nominee, and Dan Moore, Republican. Each candidate will have an opportunity to make an opening statement, followed by questions which have been developed by the League. Neither candidate has seen the questions before this evening. There was a coin toss just prior to the debate tonight, and Dan Moore won that coin toss. So Dan, the opening statement from you.
Thank you. I'm Dan Moore. Superior Court 7 is going to be the first court created in this county in nearly 20 years. I was part of the judicial team that spearheaded its creation. It exists because the cases in our county exceed what our courts were designed to handle, resulting in a strain on judicial resources and delays in justice for litigants before the court. It is needed, and needed now. To provide the relief this court needs, it's intended to handle a high-volume docket involving cases of criminal law, family law, and evictions. It'll be critical that the first judge of this court can make decisions on those cases immediately, important decisions that will impact the lives, families, and freedoms of thousands of Tippecanoe County residents every year. I am the only candidate with extensive judicial experience. Over the last 6 years as magistrate, I've made decisions on these type of cases every day while handling a high-volume docket. I'm also the only candidate whose career was focused on the courtroom. For nearly 12 years of private practice, I represented clients daily addressing the same issues in Tippecanoe County courts that will bring them before Superior Court 7. For nearly 18 years, I appeared in courts before Tippecanoe County and throughout the state nearly every day of my practice. I'm the only candidate with experience addressing these type of issues, both as a lawyer and as a judicial official, and the only candidate trusted already by judges, lawyers, and litigants in Tippecanoe County to make these decisions every day. It is that experience that will enable me to immediately take the reins of Superior Court 7 and ensure that justice is provided to all the litigants in that court. Thank you.
Jackie Chosneck, introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Jackie Chosneck. I have enjoyed the private practice of law for the last 20 years, including almost the last 17, while also serving as the City of Lafayette's Deputy City Attorney. My time in both private practice and serving the City of Lafayette has exposed me to a broad and diverse range of legal issues and allowed me to meet and interact with people from all walks of life. I am a lifelong resident of Tippecanoe County. This community embraced my grandparents and my father when they immigrated here at the end of World War II. So I was raised to always look for opportunities to give back to this community, Early in my career, I gave back by serving on the boards of Legal Aid, Girl Scouts, Ivy Tech Foundation, and Civic Theater. When my sons, Isaac and Simon, were born, my primary role outside of the office in the city was the job of mom, and I had to step back from some of these community organizations. At home, I continued to emphasize to my children the importance of community, and they have enjoyed serving on the Mayor's Youth Council and as a Columbian Park Zoo teen. My boys are now a sophomore and senior at Harrison. As they have grown, it has freed up my time to allow me to join new community organizations such as Lafayette Rotary and to serve on the United Way's Community Investment Committee. All of the roles that I have served over the years, mother, deputy city attorney, running my small business, Chosneck Law, and community member, have prepared me to continue my service to the community as the first judge of Tippecanoe Superior Court No. 7. The practical and organizational skills I have fine-tuned from those many roles, combined with my core values of integrity, of treating everyone I interact with on a daily basis with understanding and compassion, make me an excellent choice for judge.
Let me ask you, if I could, what you view as the biggest challenges facing the Tippecanoe County courts today, and how would you address them?
The biggest challenges facing the courts today would be access to the court. The courts are busy. They are. Let me think about that. So the biggest challenge is just, I'm going to put it this way. The biggest challenge to our court system is making sure that when people enter that court system, that they feel that they are being heard and that their case, whatever it might be, is being administered efficiently, quickly, and the outcome is reached with that person being heard. And I think that is something that is important, that is kind of not the high level that you think of with the court system in terms of administration or anything like that, but I think that the important thing is you have to realize that the people that are coming into the court system are some of the most disadvantaged and vulnerable people, and usually in the worst situations, or not worst, but terrible, situations of their lives where they're in trouble. And I think that the court system has to be able to treat those people well and deal with their cases efficiently and make sure that when they leave, no matter the outcome of their case, that they are heard while they are presenting their case to the court.
Thank you. Dan Moore, what in your mind are the biggest challenges facing the courts in Tippecanoe County, and how would you address them?
I think there are really two challenges that drive a tremendous amount of cases in Tippecanoe County, and that's mental health and addiction. As magistrate, I see almost all of the major felonies that come before the court, and addiction and mental health have impacts on almost all of them. Those issues also impact things involving family law, impact divorces in our juvenile system. Really, they transcend all of the issues our courts deal with. And COVID-19 is unlikely to help resolve those issues. The desperation created by the pandemic, the economic hardship is likely to drive those up. We've already seen this year our mental health court, circuit court, have almost a threefold increase in the type of mental health cases it's seen. Addressing those is difficult. All of the data on these issues tell us that often mental health and addiction are related. You usually have one, you have the other, and it's important to treat them as a twin problem with co-occurring mental illness and addictions. Early intervention in that is key. One of the things I've done as magistrate was help spearhead a grant program that paid for a risk assessment tool that is provided to nonviolent offenders when they enter the jail. And this assessment tool helps identify mental health and addiction needs as well as risks to the community, so that we can then funnel low-risk offenders into early intervention to address their mental health needs and addiction needs, hopefully reduce recidivism, keep our jails uncrowded, and keep our communities safer. Addressing these issues is going to be critical for us moving forward, both in the post-COVID-19 area and beyond.
Let me ask you more of a personal question, but if you can, describe a time when you became aware of your own bias or a blind spot related to a case in which you were working, and what internal and external steps did you take to mitigate that bias or lack of awareness?
As a lawyer representing clients of all types of races and backgrounds, it was often people would tell me as they're coming through the court system, you're trying to assure them of the fairness, they might ask, well, is there going to be anybody of color on the jury, or any of the lawyers or any of the judges, people of color? Am I going to see anybody like me that's going to impact my case? And, certainly it's not something that, I had thought about every day. And part of the way I've addressed that is by recognizing that I can't really put myself in their shoes. I can't say that I feel what you feel or experience what you've experienced. What I can do is accept their experience as valid and try to address the issue from their point of view as best as possible. Even as a judicial official, when people appear in front of me, they may use language or words that are not common for lawyers to use, or for people that grew up in Tippecanoe County, or for people that are white. And so you have to understand that somebody's difference in the way of communicating is not less valid. It doesn't mean that they should be treated different or viewed different, and check your own prejudices at the door and treat them as individuals that deserve dignity and respect. And that's what I've tried to do throughout my career.
Jackie Chasnick, describe a time, if you can, when you became aware of your own bias or a blind spot related to a case you're working on, and then what steps did you take to mitigate that bias or lack of knowledge?
Yes, so not necessarily in context with a specific case, but I have been a member of the Diversity Roundtable and participate in their monthly meetings. And the last several months have been focused on racism and, the institutional racism. And it has been the members of the Diversity Roundtable who are of color or are of minority have really spearheaded those conversations. And what I realized is it is important to sit back and actually listen to that and realize that everything that we do through the filter of our own life experiences, of our own perceptions. Just like everyone we interact with, their communication and their interaction with you is through their filter of their life experiences and their perspectives. And they're not necessarily going to be the same. And I think that really stopping and realizing that when you're interacting with people and understanding, I'm looking at this situation through my experience, my perspective, you might have something different. It's time for me to understand that. I'm not going to say that I can necessarily understand it or understand exactly where you're coming from, but I can hear it and use it to acknowledge that when I'm doing my own thinking of how I'm viewing the situation.
The term law and order is currently a strong political cry alongside prolonged protests for justice. And there's a broad spectrum, though, of philosophy that ranges from punishment to restorative justice. Where do you fall on that spectrum, and what would that look like in practice in your courtroom?
So the court is required to judge every situation that comes in front of it impartially, fairly, independently. So I can't sit here today and say what I would do with any particular case that would come in front of me because I have to know the facts of that case, the situation, apply the law as required. But I absolutely agree that there is a wide range of ways that we can handle the situation. It shouldn't always be, what are we going to do? Punish this person, put them, away. What's the source of the problem? What can we do to help that person understand where they're at, or understand their situation and try to figure out what brought them here, what can be done to help prevent it in the future while still doing what is required under the law. And I think that the problem-solving courts that the courts have instituted is a great way to deal with that. I know that we are working on, I believe Judge McVeigh is working on a mental health court here in Tippecanoe County. I have a colleague that operates a veterans court up in one of the northern counties that has been very, very successful. They're continuing to expand, and those problem-solving courts are a great way for the judges to get, as they say, out from behind the bench and attempt to understand the situation and look for alternatives to deal with it in order to help prevent that person.
Question, as law and order is this political cry right now, along with all the protests for justice, but take a look at that spectrum of philosophy that goes from punishment to restorative justice, and where do you fall in that, and what would that look like in your courtroom?
Well, justice crosses that whole spectrum. Justice is individual, and we do have to make decisions on a case-by-case basis on facts. Our Constitution in Indiana tells us that the purpose of punishment is rehabilitation. And so that's written into our Constitution. And every judge that I know and have worked with, and every decision on sentencing I've made is with the hope that it will result in some type of rehabilitation. We want to see people made whole. We want to see people come out of the system better than they went in. We want to see recidivism reduced. It isn't always possible, and sometimes part of rehabilitation involves a timeout. Sometimes somebody is going to need to have that tough love in order to go to rehabilitation. So I think you can be tough when appropriate and be merciful and compassionate when appropriate, all with an eye towards rehabilitation. But acknowledge that some cases are going to result in tougher consequences than others, and they should. For other cases, we do have problem-solving courts and other tools in our toolbox. I was part of the judicial team with Judge Person who helped organize and run the Veterans Treatment Court. And it does do great work in trying to address a vulnerable population in a way that is outside the normal criminal justice system. But it's also not going to be the right fit for everybody. The key is identifying which case is going to require which type of approach and having the experience to make that judgment and get that sentence right as many times as possible for the benefit of the person and for the benefit that's so important in selecting this judge.
Well, let me ask you this. Courtrooms are certainly intimidating and busy places for people, but what would you do to ensure that defendants understand the process, understand their rights, are respectfully heard, and not treated as just a case number?
I mean, this is something I try to do every day. So one of my roles as magistrate is to handle most of the criminal intake in the county, particularly on the felony side. So I am seeing individuals every day, and I'm often their first contact with the judicial system. It's my role to advise them of their rights. We do that orally, we do that in writing, we ask them if they understand, we try to answer questions when appropriate, and I try very hard to be sure that everybody is treated like an individual, that they're heard, they're given an opportunity to speak. Sometimes you do have to restrain that because they have rights and what they say could disadvantage them. And so explaining that I'm not shutting you down because I don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm shutting you down because what you have to say might not be to your advantage and you need to speak with a lawyer. But I pride myself on trying to be sure that everybody is treated as an individual. I try to, even when I am delivering harsh decisions, be respectful so that they know that it is not personal. It is what I think is appropriate in this situation. I try to make sure that everybody that gets bad news from me or news they may not like on the judge is looked in the eye as an individual when that happens. It is not easy. It is not easy to deal every day with people that are in crisis and hand down decisions that may not be liked by them or their families. But doing it with respect, treating people as a person, helps make them and everybody have confidence in the process, and that's critical for people having confidence in the decisions judges make and how judges handle the criminal justice system.
Jackie Chosnick, what would you do to ensure that defendants understand the process, their rights, they're heard respectfully, and they're not just treated as a number?
Yes. I mean, I concur very much with Mr. Moore on that situation. This is a high-volume court, and it's going to be necessary to keep it moving and efficient. But you cannot do that at the expense of making sure that people are heard, that they feel that they're being treated as an individual, that they're being respected. And it is important to make sure these, as I stated before, a lot of people that are coming in are in vulnerable or disadvantaged situations, or they're coming in while they're facing crisis. They're facing, situations that they never thought that they were going to have to do. And I believe that when you take the time, while balancing efficiency, in order to make sure that the people do understand why they are here, what the process is, what's going on, and what the decision is. And this decision is not always going to be a favorable outcome, and it is going to be a hard decision. But I do believe that the way that you give that decision, the way that you treat someone, the way that you make them feel that they have been heard, that they are an individual, that their person matters, can make a huge impact on how they feel about the justice system and the availability of justice within it.
Does a sitting judge have any role in advocacy or in education within the community?
I believe that it does. A judge has a unique perspective from sitting on the bench of what is going on societally within the justice system, and has a unique perspective. And I believe that it is important for a judge to step outside of the bench and be able to participate in those processes and educate and work with policymakers and other people to help understand what are the things that they are seeing, what are the issues that are seen, what are the people that are coming in presenting, the mental health issues, the substance abuse issues, and the judge is in a unique perspective in order to see that, and they absolutely should participate in helping the society understand what those issues are and give a perspective on, how to help change and modify what is going on. So,
Dan Moore, do you feel that a judge has any role in advocacy or education in the community?
I think certainly in terms of education, I think we get problematic when we talk about advocacy, or at least until what end we're talking about advocacy. But we are on the ground floor and on the front lines of issues that a lot of people don't see, and I think it is incumbent upon us to educate our legislatures and educate our community as to what those issues are, what we are trying to do to solve them. I suppose there is some advocacy in terms of resources. For instance, I mentioned the opening statement. I was part of a team of judicial officers that lobbied our legislator to create this new court because we saw a need. And so we're certainly advocating for some additional resources to address our caseloads in that regard. Since being magistrate, I spent some time as an adjunct at Ivy Tech. I speak often to schools and to other community events about the court system and how it operates. And so there is a role in there. But we have to maintain our neutrality, and we can't do things that might impact our impartiality. So how far we can cross over to advocacy, I think, is limited. I think it's not often issue-based, but it can be resource-based. But education is imperative. People should hear from their judges, understand the issues we're seeing and how we're trying to address them.
You've chosen to run as a Republican, and I want to ask you, what should the voters understand about your choice of party affiliation and how you will act as a judge on the bench?
I don't think my party affiliation or anybody's party affiliation should have anything to do with how they act on the bench. We are to be neutral arbitrators, and to take this job with a party allegiance that's partisan and divisive, I think is inappropriate to the magnitude of our job. It is an elected position, and it does require that you be political to some extent to get elected. But even our rules require that we avoid that in all but the years where we're running. I'm Republican because of beliefs in small government and principles of federalism and limited federal government. I think that there's been a long history of good Republican leadership in this county, but there's also been a long history in this county of good bipartisan cooperation, which is important. I think that people should draw conclusions about me and how I'm going to be as a judge in this court by the career I've built in law, practicing in these issues, by the way I've handled myself as a magistrate, making decisions on these issues for the last 6 years. I do not believe my party affiliation says anything about how I'll be as a judge. My character, my commitment to this community, my experience on the bench says that.
Jackie Chasnick, what should the voters understand about your choice to run as a Democrat and how you will act as a judge on the bench?
Elected position, and it is a required partisan position. So you have to select. You have to run as a party, a Democrat, as a Republican. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I've worked in the city of Lafayette, Mayor Wazorski's administration for the last 17 years. However, the role of a judge is not a partisan role. It is a partisan process to get there. But once you assume the bench, again, our rules actually do prohibit us from being engaged in any political activity during the 5 years that are not an election year. So, political affiliation is part of the process, but it doesn't have any impact on how you would rule on the court or administer the court. It is just the process to get here. But I do, have core values that reflect the Democratic Party. I've been involved in it for a long time. And again, I think that, my desire to preside over a court in a way that makes sure that it is efficient, but that everyone believes that they are being treated with respect and is critical. And I've had a lot of time and a lot of experience. So we've worked with the City of Lafayette in my role. We work across partisan lines all the time. We are the envy of the state of Indiana here in the greater Lafayette area because of our ability for the cities and the county, to work together. And it just shows that here as a community, political affiliation, yes, it is a thing, but we are capable of putting all of that aside to do what is best for our community. We do that here in local government, and then I will do the same thing. You do a system and for the citizens of Tippecanoe County.
Well, here's your chance to wrap things up. We'll begin with Dan Moore. Tell us about, make your statement, make your case.
Is this the closing
This is
statement
the
or a question?
closing
Okay,
statement.
all right. I'm running because this community has always been important to me, and I have throughout my career done things that have prepared me for this job, both in the types of law I practiced in private practice and in being magistrate. And types of experience matter. Jackie and I are both good people. We're both good attorneys, but we bring very different experiences to this bench. If you are getting a heart surgery, a heart surgeon and a plastic surgeon are both doctors with surgery experience, but for your heart, you want a heart surgeon. And my career has been designed towards this goal. I took the job as magistrate 6 years ago to ensure that I had the appropriate judicial experience to handle the next needed opening. This court is needed. It is needed now. To provide the relief that it's needed, it needs a judge that can handle its whole volume on day one. And I have that experience, and I'm ready to use it for the citizens of Tippecanoe County. Thank you.
Jackie Chasnick, the final word.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I understand that Mr. Moore has served as magistrate and has a unique perspective and unique skills, but that is not a requirement of the job. I will point out that 20 years ago when Superior Court 6 was established, Judge Morrissey came from private practice. In fact, he came from my law firm. He was a partner in our firm. He transitioned to judge as I was beginning my law career. So yes, there is something to be had there, but it is not a requirement in order to do it. And I believe that my time in city government has provided me with a broad and diverse range of legal issues. We deal with everything in city government, not just municipal law, but I have to touch upon housing law, property law. I mean, it's a little bit of everything. And that gives me a very broad range. And I also believe from coming over from the city government, I'm able to bring a fresh perspective to our local justice system. I deal with a multitude of different personalities, boards, commissions, everything in my role as city attorney, which allows me to transition that and bring a fresh perspective to our court system. Thank you.
And thank you. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Greater Lafayette, we want to thank both of our candidates for taking part this evening. And if you want to learn more about the candidates on the November ballot, the League suggests visiting their online voter guide at vote411.org. Absentee voting has already started. In-person voting actually begins on October the 6th, so make sure that you have your voice heard in the coming election. And that wraps things up. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.